welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Now, the main topic of this video is, I guess, a bit of a contentious one. But then again, aren't all of them? Basically, I guess, I'm gonna get a couple of criticisms from certain people like, oh, why didn't you include this candidate or this candidate in this thing? The biggest one that I'm definitely going to get is people say, oh, why didn't you include Tulsi Gabbard in this comparison thing? Well, for starters, I kind of railed into her last episode, so I think it's fair to give Tulsi a bit of a break. And two, the poll that I did not have, like, the winning choices didn't have Tulsi Gabbard in the choices. So, yeah, I mean, that's that. The second thing is, even though the debate's coming up in 2 days, I'm not going to do a breakdown because it's boring. At this point, I pretty much know who I think is going to do well and who's not going to do well. At this point, if you, like, there's some people are like, but what if somebody surprises me? Then I'll give my reaction to them surprising me. I don't need to give them, like, for example, like, if I did one, I would say, like, oh, I don't think Tom Steiner's going to do that well. Well, no duh, no one thinks Tom Steiner's going to do well, but then if he's like, oh, he actually did really well in this debate. So what? I mean, when you originally talking about him, you gave him nothing, and then you're just gonna say, oh, well, I mean, I was pleasantly surprised. Why even bother needing to say, oh, I think he's gonna stink at the debate? At least in debate 1, it was fine because it was open season. I could legitimately be like, oh, I pretty much know none of these guys except for, like, Tulsi or Bernie. So legitimately, any of these guys can surprise me. Like, oh, maybe Bill de Blasio will actually do well. And, I mean, he did. I didn't predict that. Kyle Kalinske predicted that. But, I mean, yeah, he did do well. So, it can be done, but at this point, it doesn't really need to see. It doesn't really need to happen. Like, we don't need to have a election prediction for this, I guess. But anyways, let's get right into the news. The first one is the biggest news thing, I guess, in the most recent times. Trump has decided that he's going to pull out of Syria. He said that a while ago, but this time he means it. He said he's going to pull out of Syria, and the Kurds, like the people who are in a certain area that the U.S. is defending, they're going to be defenseless. And we're hearing many people say, oh, this is a good idea because, oh, Trump is, Trump is going to pull out of Syria. So people are going to say, no, this is a terrible idea. You're just pulling out unilaterally with no backup plan. The Kurds are going to get killed. I guess I can kind of see where they're coming from in both aspects, but, I mean, it's weird because we're also seeing a lot of non-interventionists talk about, like, oh, this is a bad idea. We need to make sure that the Kurds are protected. I guess that's kind of like the Trump tariff thing. While Bernie might agree with Trump on trade, he does actively attack Trump on a lot of stuff because he's like, you're doing protectionism wrong. And then when you're doing protectionism wrong, you then give credence to the idea that protectionism itself is flawed. And the same thing can be said for this non-interventionism. Overall, the idea is good, but if you do it in a bad way, you can easily make it seem like, oh, non-interventionism itself is a bad thing because, look, you're leaving all these people defenseless. And, like, a lot of people are actually saying this, like, it's not even just the Warren hacks or whoever you think is like a true hack of the establishment. Like, there are people like Kenneth Mahia that are talking about this Kurdish problem and like saying, oh, we need to stop him from pulling out of the Kurd area because we need to keep the Kurds. Now, I will say, like, let me give another piece of context, because here's something you're going to not be hearing from me a lot. I'm going to be talking about a Republican on this. Thomas Massie actually explained his version of the situation in a 6-part thread. He said, like, if having troops in Syria is important, why hasn't Congress ever voted to send troops there? Like, he explains, like, there was never an actual vote to bring the people into Syria. Like, we didn't actually vote on this. This was all done unconstitutionally. And he actually explains it in this quote. If my fellow congressmen can't even find the courage to literally press a button and vote yeah, nay, or present, then they should bring all of our soldiers home from Syria tomorrow. I mean, technically, yeah, we shouldn't be there. It's not the thing. In my view, here's what you can do easily. Like, let's just say really just, oh, but we need to keep the people in this Syria. We need to keep them in Syria. Here's how you can easily do it. Have a vote tomorrow to put troops in Syria. Just do that if you want to keep them there. But, like, I'm kind of with Massie on this. If we're not even technically allowed to be there. So, at this point, we should go because we shouldn't be there. If there has been a vote, you can at least get, like, oh, fine. Since there's no vote, well, I guess, why even bother being there? And again, you might say, but we need to protect them. Yeah, because U.S. protection has worked great for the Middle East so far. It's going to start, it's going to be as great of an effect as Libya, I mean. But anyways, the next story, it's about the next debate. And one of the interesting candidates, like, this is kind of directly tying in, because one of the most non-interventionist candidates, who also talked about this Kurdish thing in a not-so-good light, Tulsi Gabbard, is considering boycotting October debate, claims DNC and the media are trying to hijack the election. Representative Tulsi Gabbard announced Thursday that she is considering boycotting the next week's Democratic presidential debate, claiming without proof that the DNC and the press are trying to rig the election. Yeah. Without proof. Now, here's the thing. The Human Rights Report has stated that, well, I mean, saying that 2020 is rigged is an unfair statement. And I'm like, dude, no, that's not true. Like, the 2016 election, we all agree that was rigged, except for, like, the centrist holdouts and the Republican. I mean, no, even the Republicans actually kind of agree that the 2016 election was rigged. Trump was screaming at the top of his lungs, like, oh, the election is rigged against Bernie Sanders. Bernie didn't even have a chance, dude. He didn't even have a chance. Like, yeah, we all acknowledge that that election was rigged. The sane people acknowledge that that election was rigged. But the 2020 election, it's, like, nobody seemed to, like, Mike is the only person that I think ever brought this up as a piece of contention. Like, I mean, what's happening to Tulsi Gabbard right now is literally the same thing that happened to one of the other candidates in the 2016 election, Larry Lessig. For those who don't remember, Larry Lessig was a law professor who created Creative Commons and was running for president under the one platform plank of campaign finance reform. His plan was very simple. He gets elected, he passes this law, he resigns, he goes home. That was his plan. The DNC kept excluding Lessig from the polls because they didn't consider him a legitimate candidate. Because he already said up front, I'm not running to win, I'm just running to bring this issue to attention. I'm not running to be president, I'm running to bring this issue to the table, and if I do happen to win, I'm going to resign at one point. And it doesn't help that the one issue that he was running on is an issue that would have, made it so that the corporate interests going into the Democratic Party wouldn't be able to give money to them anymore. So they did literally everything they could to just wipe Lessig out of existence. They just flat out didn't include him in polls and kept moving the polling threshold for the first debate. Like, the original one was I think it was you had to get 3 qualifying polls between a certain date and the Democratic debate. But then they changed it so that it had to be 3 weeks before the debate. In between the... at least 3 weeks before the debate. And then they changed it so that it had to be specifically the 3 weeks before the debate. So, it kept flipping around. And many of these polls included Joe Biden as an option, despite the fact that Joe wasn't an option in the actual presidential nomination field. So, yeah, they were pretty much screwing the election for Lessig. That's why when Mike Gravel got kicked off of the debate stage, when he was barred from going on the debate stage, I said, Gravel got Lessiged. And then when Tulsi was excluded from the debate, I said, Tulsi got Lessiged. Because that's what happened to her. She got Lessiged. Now, that's the thing. The idea is, but is it really being rigged? Maybe not directly, but what they're doing is tipping the scales so that one candidate is just handicapped for the remaining election. They can't really do anything. If you're not allowed on the debate stage, you're screwed. Nobody's gonna know who you are. Wayne Messam. I bet half of you don't even know he's still in the race. Wayne Messam has not gotten on a single debate stage, and nobody talks about him because who cares about Wayne Messam? An entrepreneur who had no notoriety managed to get on the debate stage pretty much all of the times and rose to be a top tier candidate. And Messam is just there. Now, do I think this is a good idea? No, this is an absolutely terrible idea. This is an absolutely stupid and terrible idea. Let me explain why. For starters, here's what happens. Tulsi, what is going to happen if you're not on that debate stage? Nothing. Because you know what happened when you weren't on the last debate stage? Nobody mentioned you. Nobody talked about you. Nobody mentioned your name. You weren't even brought up as a top tier candidate, despite the fact you were outpolling 2 of the people on the stage. They were saying, the field has narrowed. The final 10. This is the narrowed top 10 field. The real best candidates in the race. Even though Tulsi was literally outpolling Castro and Klobuchar. If Tulsi was on the stage, Klobuchar probably wouldn't have been on the stage. And that's what'll happen if you don't get on the debate stage this time. Well, you did get on the debate stage, but if you do not appear on the debate stage, that's what they're going to do to you. They're just going to say, oh, well, who's Tulsi Gabbard? I don't know who that is. Do you? Who is this Tulsi Gabbard? A congresswoman? No, I think we have all the Congress people on the debate stage right now. Aren't these the only people in the race at this point? Didn't the rest of them drop out? No. Like, that's what's gonna happen. You could say, well, I mean, maybe... No. This is 100% what would happen. And Nico House, once again, tried to pull a different spin on this. Because he was trying to bring up, like, oh, I mean, if she doesn't be on the stage, if she is on the debate stage, it doesn't matter. Because now they have to spend all this time talking about Tulsi Gabbard. Guess what? I didn't see any Tulsi Gabbard coverage, did you? Nope. Oh wait, scratch that. I did see one Tulsi Gabbard coverage. There was a New York Times article that was published. And lo and behold, it was not really a good one. Basically, it was a hit piece going in depth about, like, oh, Tulsi Gabbard, she's trying to ruin the democratic process by accusing the DNC of rigging. White nationalists and alt-righters and Russians have praised her. She's ruining everything. Ron Paul is endorsing her. I mean, isn't that proof of white supremacy in her campaign? I mean, look at Tulsi. Hindu, person of color. I mean, she has white nationalists written all over her. I mean, if you don't see a white nationalist in Tulsi Gabbard, frankly, I think you're blind. Yeah, you see my point. Tulsi is in a damned if they do, damned if they don't situation. So why not bring this attention while she's on the stage? And here's the thing. Now, when she gets on the stage, they know, don't cover Tulsi. Don't give her that much questions. Can't give her any questions because, you know, if we give her any questions, she's just gonna say, like, oh, the DNC's rigging it against us. We gotta not talk about it at all. So yeah, ultimately, it was a bad idea, and Tulsi should not have done it. She shouldn't have. I think it was a terrible idea. Like, I mean, you can call out the process and then not say, oh, I might not even be on the stage to talk about the process. Yang talks about how the process is stupid, and so does Bernie. But they still go there because it's the only way they're going to get attention. And Tulsi, no offense, but you were the top Googled candidate both of the times you were on the stage. I don't think you want to be getting rid of that notoriety. Speaking of the debates, Andrew Yang, the 8th Democrat to make the November debate, and according to this headline, possibly the last. Here's what it says. With a 4th qualifying poll finding his support at 3% or greater, entrepreneur Andrew Yang just became the 8th and likely final Democratic presidential candidate to secure a place on the debate stage come November. Here are the qualifications for the November debate. You have to have at least 3% in 4 national polls, or 5% in 2 polls from certain organizations in early states. So, like, let's say I'm not doing so hot nationwide, but I have 5% in Iowa and South Carolina. I can use those 2 to get in the debate rather than using the 3% polls. Okay, you can have one of those 2, and you have to get 165,000 unique donors with at least 600 unique donors per state in 20 states. So here's how this current threshold is going. Joe Biden has met all of the qualifications and will be in the next debate. Sanders has met all the qualifications. Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg have also met all qualifications. Cory Booker has met the donor threshold and the 4 polls. Tom Steyer has met the donor threshold and the 4 polls, and Andrew Yang has met the donor threshold and 4 polls. Currently, O'Rourke, Klobuchar, Castro, and Gabbard have met the donor threshold, but have not met the polling threshold. O'Rourke and Klobuchar have 1 poll, and Castro and Gabbard have no polls. The rest of the candidates are in the dust. So, yeah. At this point, many people have been saying that's probably going to be the 8 for the next debate. Don't stop trying, but, these guys are probably going to be the ones at the next debate. And it's also, many people have been taking this as like a hooray for the Yang gang. Because, Yang is doing really well. He went from an entrepreneur who was declared a minor candidate that nobody cared about, that when Wikipedia tried to put him on the major party candidate list, they're like, dude, he's not at all major. Why are you even putting him on here? He's just an Asian entrepreneur. But now he's constantly making these debates. Constantly. You can't deny Andrew Yang's momentum. And I know a lot of people in my indie left media circle kind of like to, push down Yang. But I mean, this is getting momentum. He's getting momentum. He has a lot of support. Yang is very popular. And you cannot deny that Yang is going places. Like I'm telling you now, Yang's in it for the long run. Yang ain't dropping out and endorsing Bernie and giving his delegates to him. Yang is in this for the long run. He might do it at the convention, but otherwise, he ain't leaving. Speaking of candidates that aren't leaving, Elizabeth Warren. This one is slightly out of date, but it shows you how much the Warren people were super into the whole, like, oh, Warren is clearly the better Bernie. Bernie should just drop out right now. Like, here's the thing. There was this big thing that a lot of people were circle jerking in the media about. Like, Elizabeth Warren leading Joe Biden in recent Democratic Party primary polls. She has gotten the overall average of Real Clear Politics, because Real Clear Politics, they take not only just the polls, but they average the polls and show you who's doing good and who's doing bad. And Elizabeth Warren, she's doing she's doing really well in the polls. She was polling at 26.6%, and Biden was polling at 26.4%. Wow, this is such a huge divide. Every other candidate should just drop out right now. But here's the funny thing. A lot of people were saying that, but I literally just checked Real Clear Politics to see, okay, hold on, let me see. And it said right here, let me give you the top 3 candidates. Sanders with 15.2, Warren with 26.0, and Biden with 27.8. I think she's back to number 2. And I might say, well, I mean, if she's number 2, then shouldn't all the Bernie bros just decide to endorse Warren? Dude, the polls, they aren't 100% accurate. They report the information they get, but when they purposefully get wrong information, it's not going to be right. Some people like to say, oh, the polls are rigged. I'm like, yeah, kind of, but you're not being nuanced about it. They just say the polls are rigged and are 100% inaccurate. And I'm like, well, not necessarily. They skew the polls. They don't flat out just rig the polls. You can't just, and I know it may seem naive, but you legitimately just can't. A reputable news organization that is 1 million fact checkers ready to debunk anything cannot just say, yeah, we were doing polling and it turns out John Delaney is actually doing 100% in polls. In fact, we actually polled socialists and they just don't like Bernie. Bernie should just drop out right now. Like, you can't just do that. They would be called out like day one. But I mean, they can skew polls and get away with it. Because skewing is different than rigging. Skewing a poll is where you oversample people who are more than likely going to go one way as opposed to doing it in an equal manner. For example, it's very common for polls to have Biden in the lead when it's like, we conducted the poll via voters over landline. And it's like, oh, it just so happens that literally nobody under the age of 30 was polled in this. That's how they rig the polls. When you poll the base, Bernie does well. When you poll people who aren't 100% following politics, Biden is doing well because they literally just go, oh, I'm a Democrat. Who's there? Oh, Joe Biden. I remember Joe Biden. Yeah, I could vote for Joe Biden. That's Joe Biden's support right there. That's literally Joe Biden's support. Yeah. He was the white man in black man's cabinet. Yeah, I can vote for him. That's who he is. And that's who he will be forever. He will always be Obama's VP because he is not going to get that much support. But anyways, enough about Biden because nobody cares about Biden. We're going to talk about a different presidential candidate nobody cares about. Chad Wilson of the Green Party. Chad Wilson is a minor Green Party candidate. I've talked about the Green Party nomination a little bit before, but it was before Chad was running. So, Chad, he is, kind of like with Roland Anarjo. Nobody really knows about him. Nobody really cares. He's kind of like Dennis Lambert. Like, they're just kind of there. The presidential primary is kind of being fought between Howie Hawkins and Dario Hunter. And to an extent, people like Schlakman and Sydenham get their names thrown in there as well. But, I guess if you were to say, if you were to rank candidates, it'd be like Hawkins and Hunter are top tier. Mid tier would be like Sydenham, Schlakman, and Lambert, I guess. Yeah, I think Dennis Lambert is like mid tier. Then on the bottom you have Roland and David Rold and Chad. Yeah, Chad. Chad, he's kind of running. He's trying to make it so that pretty much his huge thing is being a cannabis coalition, green guarantee. His biggest thing about his platform is a Green Party banner that would basically go 4 pillars. He wants to legalize weed, obviously, protect the environment. He wants to transmit to 100% renewable energy for community grids, municipal internet, healthcare at wholesale, reintroduce Glass-Steagall, break up the media, direct democracy, term limits, sanctions on sanctions on legacy families. Oh, okay. Okay, now I get it. You have to, he's trying to form a sanction on, the Kennedys, the Clintons, and the Bushes. Now, of course, Chad, he has to make a name for himself in the Green Party primary. I assume some ways he does it well, but there are also other ways where I don't think he's doing it in a good sense. For example, there was a huge, quote-unquote huge controversy when Howie Hawkins announced that he was going to be running for the Socialist Party nomination as well. He was going to run as a Green and a Socialist. Howie Hawkins stated that he has been registered and worked with the Socialist Party. Chad Wilson was like, wait a minute. You said you're registered as a Socialist? But you can't run as a Green unless you're registered as Green. I think we got him now, boys. And he started a petition saying, we gotta take down Howie Hawkins. He's not running a legitimate candidacy because he's a registered socialist when you have to be a registered green to run as green. I'm like, dude, do you legitimately think they haven't checked? New York is a closed primary state. You understand this, right? New York is closed primary. You run with the party you're registered with. You vote in the primary that you're registered in. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. So I'm pretty sure Howie is a green, and I even contemplated just saying outright to Howie, dude, there's an easy way you can debunk this. Just show us your voter registration. It's not that hard. Just go to a voter registration site, show who you are, screenshot it, and then blur out your address if it's on there. But I mean, Howie has stated he's worked with the Socialist Party before on his Wikipedia page. You click a link and he's worked with the Socialist Party before. He's worked with the Peace and Freedom Party before. He's worked with these other parties before. It's a similar situation to Ron Paul, I guess. Ron Paul bought a lifetime membership to the Libertarian Party back in the 80s. I mean, they didn't change him from being a Republican. He was still a lifetime member of the Libertarian Party. He just wasn't officially registered with the Libertarian Party. Then there was also a little bit of controversy because his logo, his campaign logo, looks somewhat similar to a Nazi logo. There's an eagle in a police badge type thing. And I'm like, okay, maybe you're stretching it a bit, guys. I don't think it's really necessary. I don't think so. Besides, if he were a National Socialist, he'd run with a National Socialist Party. But anyways, now on to the main topic of this video. Warren v. Sanders. Any reasonable person knows that due to the fact that Biden is incredibly incompetent, incredibly dumb, incredibly everything wrong, and people want a more populist, more leftist kind of candidate, anybody would reasonably understand that, Biden does not represent that. In fact, the two candidates that even come close to representing that, in at least the biggest ones, would probably be Bernie and Warren. Now, of course, you're going to say, but Tulsi! Yeah, Tulsi too, but, I mean, everybody pretty much kind of consensizes Bernie or Warren. I mean, even when it's not necessarily the case all the time. But we'll get to that in a bit. So, yeah. Warren and Sanders. The two people that are arguably considered the most progressive senators. Each coming from a different perspective. Bernie coming from a more radical socialist past, but then evolving into a social democrat. And Warren coming from a business-oriented Massachusetts Republican to being a Massachusetts liberal, I guess you could say. They both bring some things to the table somewhat. But inevitably, as Bernie says multiple times, people are going to have to choose one. Now, there are a lot of progressives that are actually kind of confused on this. Who should I pick? Should I pick Warren? Should I pick Sanders? In fact, many people were saying that at one point they considered Warren to be a better choice than Sanders, but now have flipped. And then some people say, a few people, 2 or 3, say that they flipped to Warren. Let me explain a couple of things why some of them have said that they flipped. The only reason that a person has actually given for someone flipping from Bernie to Warren is because they were afraid of the health scare. That was it. The health scare scared them so much that they're like, no, I think it's best if we just, not have a candidate who had a heart attack. And that's why they're choosing Warren. They also might go into the identity politics field of oh, Warren's a girl. We want the progressive ideals, but we also want a woman. Some people try to bring up the fact that the polls have Warren higher than Sanders at this point, and they're like, see, this is why, because Warren has a much better chance of taking down Joe Biden. Like, there's a lot of things that are tipping into, oh, here's who's gonna support who, and who's, like that's why a lot of people have flipped from Bernie to Warren. But the biggest crowd were people who flipped from Warren to Bernie, because going into 2015, Warren was huge shit. Everybody knew her name. Like, everybody knew who Elizabeth Warren was in the leftist field. Many leftist groups were trying to draft Warren to run for president in 2016, but she didn't. And then Bernie, seeing no viable progressive voice in the field, decided he was going to take up that mantle. And as such, Bernie got way more notoriety than Warren did. Now, people are more likely to know who Bernie is rather than Warren. It's not 100% true, but I mean, it's a little bit true. Like, Bernie has a higher profile now. Because back then, the highest profile Bernie got was like on Tom Hartman's show. That was Bernie's big moments. Now, he's being invited everywhere because he's a big name. He has kickstarted this movement that many progressives of the past could not do. Kucinich, McCarthy, Jackson. These people were trying to kickstart progressive movements in the Democratic Party, but it didn't work. Bernie was able to take that momentum and push harder, and was able to bring these progressive positions into the mainstream. Like Dennis Kucinich, when he was like, I want everybody to have health care. People were like, crazy liberal, am I right? And everyone was like, yep. And then when Bernie's like, I want free health care for everyone, the mainstream media again was like, crazy liberal, am I right? And then everyone was like, yep. But then WikiLeaks was like, well, actually, they were rigging the election the entire time. And people were like, wait, hold on. The mainstream media was lying to us this whole time? Bernie wasn't losing because his platform sinks? Huh? Maybe we should look into this platform more. Oh wait, turns out we like this platform. Give us this platform, please. You see, this is one reason why Bernie's better. He's able to take this momentum and run with it. Warren didn't have this momentum. Like, Warren, she doesn't really have this leadership mentality. She's more of a follower in a sense. Bernie is willing to lead even if he doesn't want to. You think a 78-year-old man wants to run around the country talking about how he wants to be president? No, he doesn't. He wants to retire. He wants to be done. Like, the reason why 2020 is his last election is because he's just like, I'm clocked out. Now, I mean, that's a bit of a speculative thing. I heard someone somewhere say that 2020 is Bernie's last election. They could be talking about the presidential election or just election in general, and he's not going to run for re-election in the Senate. But either way, I mean, it doesn't really matter. Bernie's willing to be more of a leader, like a fighter, than Warren is. And it's kind of a mentality in regards to a lot of votes. Like, Bernie, he's willing to be a huge deciding vote on a lot of these big issues, whereas Warren isn't necessarily going to do so. And in regards to legislation itself, like, Bernie's willing to go to other people and, like, he puts amendments in other people's bills so he can get his legislation done. He pushes his own bills that'll be really strong. He teams up with House people all the time to get, like, better bills done in the House, too. There was a time in the House of Representatives when he was a House member where a Republican literally said, like, oh, I was just given this bill by Bernie, and he just said, No. I don't want my name on this bill. I'm a co-sponsor. No, you're the sponsor. Like, Bernie's willing to get stuff done. Bernie's willing to do a lot of things. And Warren, not really. Another thing that ties into that is Warren's waffling. Warren waffles on a lot of issues. Like, a lot of issues. Like, she'll say one thing one day and then go back on it the next day. Like, let me give one example that was a while ago. Elizabeth Warren, do you think the 2016 election was rigged? Yep. One day later, no, actually, what I meant to say was it was a fair process. But it seemed rigged, but it wasn't really rigged. I mean, it was... Warren, shut up. Warren, go with your leftist gut. You clearly have a leftist spine, but you're not letting it shine. You're not letting it straighten up. You're slouching. You're breaking your spine. You've clearly been lifting with your back too much because your spine's broken. She needs to show her leftist chops, and sometimes she does. Like, she'll say one thing that is really good 1 second, and then she will just change her mind. Like, here's a recent example where she said, I'm going... Like, one of the big things that many people were bringing up about Warren was that she was talking about, like, no corporate funding in the primary. Like, she wasn't going to take any PAC money, any corporate funding in her primary. But then in the general election, all bets are off. She'll take as much money as she wants because she doesn't believe in unilateral disarmament. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders says, you can't be a part of this corporate funding. Like, you can't take this corrupt system's money and expect to not be influenced by it. Warren says that too, to an extent, but she still takes the money. Like, it's like, wait, what? Hold on, what? Then, everybody got a little bit happy at Warren, because everyone was like, oh, Warren's great. She was, like, she said that she's not going to take any of the funding. She's not going to do any big money fundraisers. Next day, she said, oh no, what I meant was, she waffled on it, like, just like that. One thing that is hilarious was the one time where she did it in the span of, like, 2 seconds. Due to this whole Hunter Biden controversy, they said, like, would a sitting VP's son be able to, like, do something about embezzling money? And then Warren was like, oh, I mean, well, no, they wouldn't. I mean, I think, like, really, I'd have to think about it a lot more. It's like, wait, what do you mean? You just said no. You just said no. Why are you changing your mind, like, literally now? This is stupid. Why, Warren? Go with your gut. Your gut is clearly telling you the right answers. But you surround yourself with these Democratic establishment hacks who are clearly just whispering something in your ear to appease the establishment. Warren, like, I compare Elizabeth Warren to the let's paint this scenario in our heads. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Tulsi Gabbard, and Nina Turner, they're all the nerds. They're all the nerds in school who get picked on. Nobody likes them. Everybody, like, gives them wedgies, like, hey, what's up, nerd? And then they'll hit them, drop their books, and blah, blah, blah. They sit at the table, but Warren has the new video game console, so the big bullies, you know, Hillary Clinton, Tom Perez, you know, all these DNC establishment guys, they treat Warren like she's one of the crew, but in order to do that, she has to give up on her friends. And then, like I'm painting like a 80s movie, and then, like, but it's like Warren doesn't get the whole, I mean, okay, I guess Tulsi kind of was in this scenario too back in, like, 2015, but then she's like, it's like an 80s movie, like, at the end, Tulsi's like, guys, I realized that being cool isn't all that it's cut out to be. You got room in your crew, your nerd crew, for one more. Always, Tulsi. Always. But then Warren's just like, yeah, I'm just going to stay with the cool kids. Is that cool? That's how Elizabeth Warren is, in a sense. She's the nerd who tries desperately to be cool. And I mean, the bullies still bully her. They still knock on her all the time. They're just like, nerd. But she just takes it because, why not? She's with the cool kids. So everyone thinks she's cool, but not. Another thing is, Warren's plans are just, like, Warren, remember Warren, she's got a plan for that. But her plans aren't necessarily that good. They're all mostly a watered-down version of Bernie's plans. Let me give you the biggest example. Student loan debt. Everybody was talking about, like, Warren's student loan debt. Like, oh, Warren is going to cancel $50,000 in student loan debt. That's amazing. Meanwhile, 2016 Bernie was already saying that he was going to cancel all $1.6 trillion of student loan debt. And he unveiled that for his 2020 plan. Like, you're just ripping off Warren. Like, for some reason, everybody likes to say that. Like, oh, Bernie's just taking a hand out of Warren's book. It's like, guys, this has been Bernie's platform since 1972. Like, every progressive is borrowing from this platform. And that's fine. The more people who advocate for these platforms, the better. But when you're watering down these plans, it's not necessarily going to bode well. And it's a similar thing with Medicare for All. Bernie's like, here's Medicare for All. Medicare for All. This is it. There are no ifs, ands, or buts. This is it. And then Warren said, well, I believe there are many paths to Medicare for All. Nope. Just untrue. This is Medicare for All. You can't get it through public option. You can't get it through Medicare X. You can't get it through Medicare Who Want It. You can't get it through this way. This is the way to do it. You either do it this way, or it's not Medicare for All. You can say it's a universal healthcare system, but you can't say it's Medicare for All. Like, that's the thing. You can just easily say the term Medicare for All and just boom, everybody will just be like, oh, that's Bernie's plan. You like Bernie's plan, so you're cool. It's really stupid sometimes. Like, Warren, you do things that are great. You've advocated for a lot of these before, but there's sometimes where you're just like, why? Like, I mean, there was one thing that many people were pointing out, like, there was one person on Twitter, Philosrob or whatever, he said, like, how come Warren hasn't advocated for a Medicare for All system until 2017? And then I cited a piece from a Warren book where she did advocate for a single-payer healthcare system in 2008. She did. That is true. During her 2012 Senate bid, however, she did kind of say, like, oh, well, I mean, I'm for fixing the Affordable Care Act. I'm for strengthening the Affordable Care Act. When I mean, Warren, you could have easily said both. You could have said, like, oh, at this point in time, I'll strengthen the Affordable Care Act, and then I will work towards getting a single-payer system. I don't see how that's hard. Like, I mean, for some people in healthcare, I legitimately don't get why it's so hard to just say, at this point, at this time, I will strengthen the Affordable Care Act, but then I will also work to transition us into a Medicare for All system so that everybody will be covered. Is it legitimately that hard? For some reason, people are just like, it's one or the other. It's like people who say, like, a federal jobs guarantee or a UEI. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You can pick both. It doesn't have to be one or the other, but you make it one or the other so that you can have this big fight. Now, I mean, again, I'm not saying, like, oh, everybody should be saying, like, oh, we need to fix the Affordable Care Act and Medicare for All. I'd prefer at this point people just say Medicare for All. But I mean, in 2012, why couldn't you have just said, oh, I'll do the Affordable Care Act at the moment, and then I'll work to Medicare for All? Like, it's like people who advocate for a public option. It's like, dude, you're 10 years too late. It would have worked in 2008, and it's not going to work now. At this point, we need Medicare for All. It's not going to be... A public option ain't going to fix this. Like, it's good. That would have been good in 2008 talk. Like, Dennis Kucinich, who was a huge advocate for a universal healthcare system, was, like, super against the Affordable Care Act because the Affordable Care Act didn't include a public option. Because he was like, it was the only way that the Affordable Care Act could have actually worked, in a sense, if it was a full-on public option. Then... Like, think about it. If we had a public option back in 2009, we'd be in a much better place to talk about Medicare for All. I think that if it were done back in 2008, we could be in a single-payer system right now. Because then, with a public option under the belt, people could actually, the Democrats who want to talk about healthcare, they could actually transition into a single-payer system. But I mean, that's just something. I mean, I know there's like a lot of Democrats that just say, oh, no, Medicare and Social Security and Obamacare, they're enough. It's like, they're not enough. But anyways, back to Warren v. Sanders. Another thing that many people point out is, as a difference between the two, and it's mostly kind of smaller things at this point maybe, but it's the idea of, like, Warren is a self-proclaimed capitalist to her bone. And that makes sense, because she was a Massachusetts Republican. Massachusetts Republicans were business-oriented. And I don't think they were explicitly anti-gay. They were mostly like kind of Rockefeller-ish Republicans. You know, business-oriented. Maybe like a little more moderate or lefty on social issues. But otherwise, they were mostly like market people. You know, the private market can kind of do a lot of stuff on its own. But they were mostly business-oriented and not social conservatives. That makes sense where Warren comes from. Warren comes from a more capitalistic point of view, ergo she might be a bit more market-oriented. Whereas Bernie, again, he doesn't come from that kind of root. He doesn't come from capitalist roots. He came out of the socialist political sphere to a social democrat, whereas Warren has gone more into, I don't know exactly what to call her, progressive maybe, but I mean, maybe like a New Deal, kind of like a, in between like what a modern day progressive is and a New Deal liberal, in between that kind of crowd, I guess would probably be where I would place Warren. As an individual senator, maybe he'll do well, but as the leader-in-chief, you probably want someone who's more lefty. And I mean, yeah, definitely if someone's coming more from a capitalistic point of view, they're going to be more defensive of capitalism and the markets and how it'll fix everything. And I mean, another thing is, again, like, I'm mostly adding on to previous points, like, Warren didn't stand up for the Dakota Access Pipeline people, despite the fact that she's a Native American. Like, oh, why not? You could have had this huge platform to talk about it. But, I mean, you didn't. There's also many people who talk about her votes that are bad. Like, her most infamous one was that she voted for one of Trump's military budgets. But, I mean, many people also like to bring up, like, oh, she's part of the Hell No Caucus, which is the group of, like, presidential candidates plus Jeff Merkley, who consistently vote against all of Trump's cabinet positions. Not all of Trump's cabinet positions. Yeah, most of them are cabinet positions. I think Kirsten Gillibrand's the only person who's turned down every single Trump cabinet member. But, I mean, otherwise, everybody's voted for at least one. But, I mean, it's like Bernie chose one over, like, pretty much Bernie picked, like, one. I don't know which one it was, but it was, like, one of them. I don't know which. And the biggest one many people seem to bring up in Warren's spinelessness, like in regards to her not being as leadership worthy, is her not endorsing Bernie in 2016. Now, back in the day, when I was younger, when I was 16, 17, I was a bit more angry at Warren for not doing so. Especially considering I was in a lot of Bernie groups on Google+. Yes, I used Google+. And they were hugely advocating for a Sanders-Warren ticket. And I was like, yeah, she seems cool. And I mean, turns out, no. She decided that she would stay out of the endorsement process entirely and then just pick Hillary when the nomination process was complete. Well, I mean, not even when it was complete. When Hillary became the presumptive nominee, she threw her support behind Hillary. Like, I mean, I don't necessarily... I'm not as mad about it now as I was then because, I mean, at this point, I more care about the substance, not the, oh, she endorsed this candidate over this candidate, because if you play the endorsement game, everybody loses. If you say, oh, this candidate endorsed this person over this person, you always lose. You could easily say that for any scenario whatsoever. Oh, Bernie didn't endorse Jill Stein. He's a shill. Oh, Dennis Kucinich didn't endorse Ralph Nader. He's a shill. Oh, Tulsi Gabbard didn't endorse Alan Grayson in the Florida Senate race. She's a shill. Like, you can play this game on anybody. Not everybody's going to make their endorsements exactly how you want them. I prefer more criticisms based on policy. Like, if you bring up, oh, she voted for one of Trump's military budgets, I'd be like, okay, that's a bad vote. But, I mean, it does show that she's more scheme. She's more of a, oh, this will hurt my chances at getting the VP slot with Hillary Clinton. So I might as well not do that. And I mean, it didn't even help Warren in the long run. She didn't even make it to the final two of the vetting. The final two of the VP vetting were Sherrod Brown and Tim Kaine. Neither of whom would have been a hand to the Bernie wing, because Hillary Clinton didn't want the hand to the Bernie wing, because she automatically was like, you're going to vote for me, so what's the point in losing? So what's the point in even giving you something? I'm going to win anyways, so you have no other options. You might as well just, like, it doesn't matter who I pick. I could pick Obama to be my VP. I could pick myself to be my VP, and you still vote for me. Didn't necessarily pan out the way she wanted, but if she at least picked Warren or Sherrod or Bernie especially, for her ticket, especially considering her slogan was stronger together, she could have done something. She could have done well. But anyways, inevitably, the real difference between Bernie and Warren is this. Bernie has a history of fighting for these issues, fighting for these huge changes in our political, economic, and social sphere, standing with gay rights activists in the 70s, standing up for civil rights in the 60s, fighting for literally the same political positions that he is fighting for now since 1972. Like, his, over 30 years of political relevancy, he's been fighting for the exact same issues, whereas Elizabeth Warren has a history of not standing up for what's right when the going gets tough, and usually it's just okay on some things. So inevitably, the choice really is, if you're a lefty, Bernie. Bernie is your only choice. If you're a left-winger, progressive, socialist, social democrat, whatever, and you're going to vote in the Democratic primary, If you identify as a leftist, you're on the left, you want left-wing ideals, the only option you have in the current 2020 Democratic presidential field is independent Senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders. That's all I have to say on that. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to be notified when a future video of mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website or follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Quora, or check out my articles on the Independent Political Report.